Hey everyone. So this is part two of the homosexual agenda. If you didn't see part one, we went over the homosexual manifesto, which is said to be satire. But as you all could plainly see, that once we actually read it, you could see that it was just an agenda that was laid out before us. So this we're going to look at today, the overhauling of straight America. This was written by Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen, except Hunter Madsen went by a pen name, Erastus Pill. Now, Erastus is from ancient Greece. The word means an adult male in a relationship with a boy, also known as philetor or philetor, which is the root word for pederasty. Now, this is a must read article, okay? This was originally published in 1987 in Guide magazine. It's the blueprint for this now global homosexual propaganda campaign to replace marriage-based society, meaning natural family marriage-based society, with a culture of what of sexual anarchy. Only this article states the homosexual or the gay goals and tactics with such alarming frankness. So we're going to look at this and we're going to examine this. So it's called the Overhauling of Straight America. The first order of business is desensitization of the American public concerning gays and gay rights. To desensitize the public is to help it view homosexuality with indifference instead of with keen emotion. Ideally, we would have straights register differences in sexual preference, the way they register different tastes for ice cream or sports games. She likes strawberry, I like vanilla. He follows baseball, I follow football. No big deal. So, do we ever sit back and wonder where all of these different surveys or check boxes for our likes and dislikes come from? So, at least in the beginning, remember, folks, this is the written agenda of this is the written homosexual agenda. This is the outline for all of the lgbTQia, trans, queer, rainbow cultists, propagandists, whatever you want to call them. At least in the beginning, we are seeking public desensitization and nothing more. It's the same thing they do. They groomed America, basically, because it's the same exact thing that they do in the schools with the children. Once they target them, they desensitize them. Once a child is desensitized, it is easier for that child to be sexualized. And then, of course, it is easier to be victimized and traumatized and criminalized, weaponized, sterilized, and all types of other things once they get mixed up into the trans queer agenda. So they want to groom America. Actually, they have groomed America. So America, you've been groomed. We do not need and cannot expect a full appreciation or understanding of homosexuality from the average American. You can forget about trying to persuade the masses that homosexuality is a good thing, but if you only can get them to think that it is just another thing, with a shrug of their shoulders, then your battle for legal and social rights is virtually won. And to get to shoulder shrug stage, gays as a class must cease to appear mysterious, alien, loathsome, and contrary. See, a large-scale media campaign will be required in order to change the image of gays in America. And any campaign to accomplish this turnaround should do 6 things. Now, pay attention to these 6 things, because as you see, or will see, they've already been accomplished, folks. This agenda is completed. Now, let me tell you something very important about these agendas that are in black and white. I spent over 30 years as a member and an advocate of the rainbow cult. I'd never heard of the Homosexual Manifesto or the Overhauling of Straight America. I did hear of After the Ball, but I never heard of those two very specific outlines of an agenda. However, I completely recognized every single aspect of those agendas as every single aspect that my community impressed upon me, right? That the leaders of this cult had put into its pawns, me and many others, to stand up and fight for. So I actually, about a month or so ago, maybe 2 months now, I asked a man that identifies as homosexual what he thought of the Homosexual Manifesto and the Overhauling of Straight America. And you know what he said to me? What are those? Not surprisingly, right? Because I had never heard of them until I actually read them after I was out of the cult. So I sent him some links and told him, check it out. The next message I got for him, he said to me, I've never felt so used. He said, I'd never heard of these things, but everything in these things is everything that I took part of by guidance of my community, right? By guidance of the cult, we were pawns to further its agenda. While we had never read these written agendas, we were the pawns that acted these things out and participated in these things being completed. So, number one of the 6 things is talk about gays and gayness as loudly and as often as possible. The principle behind this advice is simple. Almost any behavior begins to look normal if you are exposed to enough of it at close quarters and among your acquaintances. The acceptability of the new behavior will ultimately hinge on the number of one's fellows doing it or accepting it. See, one may be offended by its novelty at first. Many, in times past, were momentarily scandalized by streaking, eating goldfish, and premarital sex. But as long as Joe Sixpack feels little pressure to perform likewise, and as long as the behavior in question presents little threat to his physical and financial security, he soon gets used to it and life goes on. The skeptic may still shake his head and think people are crazy these days, but over time his objections are likely to become more reflective, more philosophical, less emotional. This is the grooming of America, folks. The way to be numb raw sensitivities about homosexuality is to have a lot of people talk a great deal about the subject in a neutral or supportive way. And thanks to the World Wide Web, the internet, that took place quickly. Open and frank talk makes the subject seem less furtive, alien, and sinful, more above board. Constant talks builds the impression that public opinion is at least divided on the subject and that a sizable segment accepts or even practices homosexuality. Even rancorous debates between opponents and defenders serve the purpose of desensitization, so long as respectable gays are front and center to make their own pitch. The main thing is to talk about gayness until the issue becomes thoroughly tiresome. Again, this is the grooming of America. When we say talk about homosexuality, we mean just that. In the early stages of any campaign to reach straight America, the masses should not be shocked and repelled by premature exposure to homosexual behavior itself. Instead, the imagery of sex should be downplayed, and gay rights should be reduced to an abstract social question as much as possible. First, let the camel get his nose inside the tent, only later his unsightly derriere. The average American household watches over 7 hours of television daily. Those hours open up a gateway into a private world of straights through which a Trojan horse might be passed. This is the desensitization and the deceiving of America. So far, gay Hollywood has provided our best covert weapon in the battle to desensitize the mainstream. Bit by bit, over the past 10 years, gay actors and gay themes have been introduced into television programs and films, though often this has been done to achieve comedic or ridiculous effects. On the whole, the impact has been encouraging. While public opinion is one primary source of mainstream values, religious authority is the other. When conservative churches condemn gays, there are only two things we can do to confound the homophobia of true believers. True believers. So first, folks, recognize true believers. They recognize true believers are the ones who what? Do not fall for homosexuality as an innate orientation. First, we can use talk to muddy the moral waters. This means publicizing support for gays by more moderate churches, raising the theological objections of our own about conservative interpretations of biblical teachings, and exposing hatred and inconsistency. Second, we can undermine the moral authority of homophobic churches by portraying them as antiquated backwaters, badly out of step with the times and with the latest findings of psychology. I myself happen to believe that the Westboro Baptist Church was a demonic plant, that it was a part of, that it was formed and established and put into the mix solely for the purpose of accomplishing this agenda. Against the mighty pool of institutional religion, one must set the mightier draw of science and public opinion, the shield and the sword of that accursed secular humanism. Such an unholy alliance has worked well against churches before, on such topics as divorce and abortion. Wow. So there's something to look at. They recognize, one, that true believers know for a fact that homosexuality is evil, it is wicked, and that it is not of God. But two, they also know that they can desensitize the church with any topic really, but they can desensitize the church with again on homosexuality, but they already have. That the church has already been desensitized to the two very important topics like divorce and abortion, right? Adultery and murder. So with enough open talk about the prevalence and acceptability of homosexuality, that alliance can work again here. Number 2 of 6, portray gays as victims, not as aggressive challengers. At least that was then, because now we already know what happens when you challenge one of them. They get very aggressive. Why? Because they're emotionally invested in their thoughts and feelings. They are victims of this cult. They're sold out. They know nothing else, and they need to be reprogrammed. In any campaign to win over the public, gays must be cast as victims in need of protection so that straights will be inclined by reflex to assume the role of protector. If gays are presented instead as a strong and prideful tribe promoting a rigidly nonconformist and deviant lifestyle. They already know that their death style is deviant. They are more likely to be seen as a public menace that justifies resistance and oppression. Now, I want you to pay attention to this next part, because this next part, and as we go further on, it gets even more so important and very revealing of the that reason, we must forego the temptation to strut our gay pride publicly when it conflicts with the gay victim image. We must walk the fine line between impressing straights with our gray numbers on the one hand and sparking their hostile paranoia. They are all around us on the other. A media campaign to promote the gay victim image should make us symbols which reduce the mainstream's sense of threat, which lower its guard, and which enhance the plausibility of victimization. Now, this next part is probably one of the most important factors of this agenda. It almost goes without saying that groups on the farthest margin of acceptability, such as NAMBLA, which is a pederast group, right? It's a North American Man-Boy Love Association, that they must play no part at all in such a campaign. Because why? Suspected child molesters will never look like victims. That's a telltale right there. That tells it all. So they knew that they had to disassociate themselves at that time with pederast organizations. Now that this agenda has been completed as of maybe 7 to 10 years, that is exactly when NAMBLA came back into the mix in the Pride parades. So did MAPS, minor attracted persons. So if we do not see or cannot see that this agenda has laid a platform for the pederast movement to rise up, then our head is in the sand, or maybe we're a part of the problem. Now, there are two different messages about the gay victim that are worth communicating. First, the mainstream should be told that gays are victims of fate, in the sense that most never had a chance to accept or reject sexual preference. So they do know it is a preference. It is not an orientation. It is a preference. It is a preference. Preference is something that's learned through behavior. Bad behavior teaches bad habits or bad preferences. Every single man or woman that I know or have ever spoken to that were wrapped up into this cult have suffered a traumatic experience. The majority, have been molested, sexually abused, sex trafficked. Many others just had very bad relationships with almost all the time their same-sex parent. Others just didn't have present or very good parents. And so they went looking for that validation elsewhere. So the message must read, as we continue on with this rainbow cult agenda, the message must read, as far as gays can tell, they were born gay. As far as they can tell, they were born that way. Guess what? The Bible says that we're all born that way, whatever that is for us, because we're all born into sin and we're shaped in iniquity. Iniquity at its root means perversion. So we're all shaped in perversion. Just as you were born heterosexual or white or black or bright or athletic. Nobody ever tricked or seduced them. They never made a choice and are not morally blameworthy. What they do isn't willfully contrary, it's only natural for them. This twist of fate could as easily have happened to you. What better way to guilt or shame someone in, to accepting or embracing your bad habits, your bad behavior, than to try to deflect that, oh, you could be me, you could be going through this as well. That's why it's so important when I give testimony to those that are trapped in this cult, that I'm telling them all about them, but telling them all about me. And that's really important. Straight viewers must be able to identify with gays as victims. Mr. and Mrs. Public must be given no extra excuses to say they are not like us. In any campaign to win over the public, gays must be cast as victims in need of protection so that straights will be inclined by reflex to assume the role of protector. Number 3 is give protectors a just cause. And I'm only going to touch on very specific aspects of these next few ones. Few straight women and even fewer straight men will want to defend homosexuality boldly as such. Most would rather attach their awakened protective impulse to some principle of justice or law, to some general desire for consistent and fair treatment in society. Our campaign should not demand direct support for homosexual practices, but instead take anti-discrimination as its theme. You see, people are born black or white, right? They are born Chinese or Spanish or Greek or African American. They're born either male or female. But when it comes to heterosexuality, you're not born heterosexual. You are created heterosexual. You're created in God's perfect image in this heterosexual design, so that all sin you commit through your life is heterosexual sin. So there's no such thing as homosexual sin versus heterosexual sin. All sin is heterosexual sin. Homosexuals are heterosexual. They're just committing homosexual sin. It's simple. It's especially important for the gay movement to hitch its cause to accepted standards of law and justice, because its straight supporters must have at hand a cogent reply to the moral arguments of its enemies. The homophobes clothe their emotional revulsion in the daunting robes of religious dogma. So defenders of gay rights must be ready to counter dogma with principle. Number 4 is make gays look good. In order to make a gay victim sympathetic to straights, you have to portray him as every man. But an additional theme of the campaign should be more aggressive and upbeat. To offset the increasingly bad press that these times have brought to homosexual men and women, the campaign should paint gays as superior pillars of society. Yes, we know. This trick is so old it creaks. But obviously, it worked. It worked in the grooming of America. Number 5 is make the victimizers look bad. Isn't that something? Deflection, right? Hasn't that always been one of the quick go-to reflexes when somebody is called on their what they're doing, called out on their wrongs? They deflect. At a later stage of the media campaign for gay rights, long after the other gay ads have been commonplace, it will be time to get tough with the remaining opponents. To be blunt, they must be vilified. This will be all the more necessary because by that time, the entrenched enemy will have quadrupled its output of vitriol and disinformation. Our goal is here. Our goal here is twofold. First, we seek to replace the mainstream's self-righteous pride about its homophobia with guilt and shame. And then second, we intend to make the anti-gays look so nasty that average Americans will want to dissociate themselves from such types. So again, this is when they implanted this fake or this facade of the evil church, right? They created Westboro Baptist and they put them out there to represent the church and to represent Christianity. And they didn't, of course. They didn't represent the church. They didn't represent God. They did not represent Christianity. They represented hate. And it is exactly what this cult wanted that group to represent, because then even Christians would want to dissociate from Christianity. The public should be shown images of ranting homophobes whose secondary traits and beliefs disgust Middle America. Now, these images might include the KKK demanding gays be burned alive or castrated, bigoted Southern ministers drooling with hysterical hatred to a degree that looks both comical and deranged, menacing punks, thugs, and convicts speaking coolly about the fags they have killed or would like to kill, or on tour of Nazi concentration camps where homosexuals were tortured and gassed. And so, but let's go to the bigoted Southern ministers drooling with hysterical hatred. Now, yeah, we know that there are many people out there that have a lot of hate in their heart. But this group, this Westboro Baptist, this was specifically, it's what I call a demonic plant. It was specifically put in place to do exactly what it did, is to help this agenda to actually be accomplished. A campaign to vilify the victimizers is going to enrage our most fervent enemies, of course. But what else can we say? The shoe fits, and we should make them try it on for size with all of America watching. So number 6 would be solicit funds. The buck stops here. Number 7, getting on the air, or you can't get there from here. So they just talk about getting into the advertising, television, radio, mainstream media, press. And as we know, so visual 1, 2, and 3, I think it is, are actually just parts of number 7. And so this is really important, right? This is something that we really have to pay attention to, guys. Let me stop sharing. There we go. So if we're not paying attention, then what are we doing? So the reason that these written homosexual agendas are so important is because a lot of homosexuals out there have never heard of them. And when they do, and they actually see them and read them, like me, like many others, they see that they were pawns of this cult that used them to further its agenda. And that's really how we wake others up, is by exposing the darkness, because that's what we're called to do, and actually showing them how they've been used by this cult to further its agenda. Hey, that is homosexual agenda number 2. There may be a number 3. I'm not too sure at this point. But thank you guys. I appreciate you, and have a blessed day. Peace.